My name is Gaia Nafziger, and I'm the Graduate Student Coordinator for the LAEP Speaker Series. Thank you for attending our Speaker Series in the Department of Landscape Architecture and Environmental Planning. The mission of the Speaker Series is to engage our students and faculty with thought leaders in the allied design professions. These talks are recorded for posterity, for use in studios, and for the greater community. We ask you to be engaged and polite during the talks, to listen and quietly take notes, to avoid digital distraction, and to stay for the entirety of the talk. A short Q&A will follow, after which you can scan the code for attendance and meet upstairs in the common studio for more conversation and refreshment. Today, we're hearing from Professor Carlos Licon, who told me that his lecture is about, and I quote, "I'm not a landscape architect." As those of us who have been lucky enough to learn from Carlos know, he has quite the sense of humor, but in many ways, that title gives us a glimpse at one of Carlos's great strengths, that he's not a landscape architect. He brings a different and crucial perspective in his evaluations and contributions to projects. His direct way of communicating brings grounding and clarity in a discipline that can sometimes feel overly broad and nebulous. Carlos is originally from Chihuahua, Mexico, and has always been someone who learns by doing, someone who likes to build things, take them apart, and understand how they work. As landscape architecture wasn't in the zeitgeist at the time in Mexico, the impulse to understand these frameworks led him straight to architecture. After completing his degree, Carlos spent time working in architectural projects throughout the state of Chihuahua, including projects in and around Ciudad Juarez. This period helped cement his education as an architect, and as he'll tell you, it also left him uniquely qualified to recommend the best burrito in the city. Carlos's interest in coming to the United States grew out of a desire to learn more about passive solar design and low-energy architecture. He came to the US on a Fulbright scholarship to pursue a master's degree in environmental planning, followed by a Ph.D. in environmental planning and design at Arizona State University. He first came to USU as a visiting lecturer before eventually returning in 2008 as a full-time member of the LAEP faculty. Beyond his academic pursuits, I know Carlos for his thoughtfulness and kindness, as well as his preternatural ability to spot a crooked line. He's someone who avoids the spotlight, but whose influence is deeply felt through his teaching and mentorship. Outside the studio, he can often be found fly fishing or immersed in the meticulous world of slot car racing, interests that say a lot about his patience, curiosity, and appreciation for craft at every scale. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our very own Carlos Licon.
That covers about half of the presentation, so it's going to be even shorter than I thought. So I'm here in the landscape architecture program with a background in architecture and some studies in environmental planning. So this is my journey, which is what we will be talking about. Get ready to take a lot of notes and detailed explanations of everything. But to make things fair for everybody, we will just get into what happens most of the time. So let's talk a little bit about me, a little bit of repetition of what Gaia already explained. But my background is in architecture from Mexico, where I took some time after my bachelor's to work a little bit in architecture practice and a little bit of design build. Then I end up coming to the States to pursue a master's in environmental planning, like, again, Gaia already told you, and eventually end up with another graduate degree in landscape, in environmental design and planning. So, no LA, right? And, but I had a chance to, after my studies, to go back to Mexico and teach a little in an architecture school. I teach in 2 programs in architecture school and a third one and a master's degree in architecture, teaching mostly in urban design and urban planning issues. And eventually was able to come here to Utah, and I've been here for a little while. So my journey through this time has kind of put me in what I want to call the neighborhood of landscape architecture, where we are together with disciplines that do similar work or that approach the similar settings, similar sites, and similar issues in many cases. And this neighborhood, like any other neighborhood, has good neighbors, not so good neighbors, some gossip, and some other features in there. So you never know who is talking to who and what there's being saying behind somebody's back. And but eventually we all end up being sharing projects, issues, concerns, and interests. That also creates several probably wrong perceptions of from each other, and that leads to different understanding of the role of each one of us have in this process of developing, building, designing, and doing things. And some of those things is that the building is not necessarily the biggest rock in the landscape. So we need to understand that buildings have an interaction with the space that is outside. And both of these spaces have to be designed. I have to create an understanding with each other. You don't place a building, or you do not ignore a building in the landscape. The same way, the landscape is not the template, the tablecloth for your beautiful piece of art. And it is, again, the interaction is real, depending on the interaction needs to happen depending on which perspective you take from the building or from the landscape. Another thing that is important to understand is that landscapes have a great variation in how you delimit the landscape. So, and the way the landscape, the way you approach the landscape defines a whole bunch of different ways of determining how far you need to go in that. That's pretty unique of landscape architecture. Another thing that is important to understand, that we don't do urban design the same way we do architecture, because the city is more than just a building. Things happen in cities that are not understandable from just a simple architecture perspective on things. Complexity is an issue that more and more we approach, and we accept that part of the realities of the world that we're in. And all of these disciplines, all of these neighbors have a different tackle of this, of how to address complexity. And sometimes we look at a very large scale. Sometimes we have to understand things at a really minor scale. And landscape architects engage in processes that put you in a variety of scales in that. And sometimes this perspective on how we tackle our portion of that complexity creates the differences in perception of who has the leading role, or who has the voice in this process of designing or planning. Landscape architects are particularly, together with planners, are particularly capable of understanding this do-nothing scenario, which is another characteristic that landscape architects and planners share, and sometimes other disciplines struggle to defend, to understand. Architects are driven to make proposals and to design and to make change and to intervene, and sometimes architects, we don't spend a lot of time trying to understand that we need to make a pause, understand what happens when things, when you let things go. And that's also the understanding that in landscape architecture and even in planning, the uncertainty and the dynamics of the landscape require us to make that pause and see what happens if we let things go, and try to consider that as a possibility, because we don't have the absolute control of everything in here. And those scenarios often we call them dumb scenarios, may lead to catastrophic events. So then our actions in planning and our actions in landscape architecture interventions are supported by this analysis that can help us understand how to make things a little better. So those characteristics that defines this neighborhood also create, like what I say, these kind of odd, twisted perceptions where a planner may be thought of visionary and futuristic, and we put them in that box, or an architect in something that is about being inspired and being in style, or a scientist of being methodical and systematic, or an engineer of being safe and efficient and producing all these things. But the landscape architects kind of need to filter things to all of these lenses and all of these circumstances and perceptions and skills in order to understand what is the role that we have. How do we create or select our approach to things? So in a little bit more or less playful approach, all these disciplines actually have serious reasons to exist, and they do have important considerations that drive their decisions and what they do. Architecture, order is very important. Order, organization, geometry, these type of things become really important. A great deal of interpretation in reality in order to how is that reflected in that building that you're designing, or how you're responding through the specific aspects of that. And eventually all of that needs to be transformed in some sort of decisions about space. Planning deal in a world full of uncertainty. You're dealing with the future. You need to take things knowing that they may not happen the way you think they are going to happen, or you plan based on an expected future, but you don't have an absolute control of that. There is also, planning is driven by a lot of things that go through a public process. Sometimes we vote, sometimes we need to present and gather people's opinion, and the process is complicated. It's quintessential democratic, hopefully. It's also could be very biased, but it is public, and that's part of public life. And it has transformed in some sort of space dimensions. Science is really focused on finding evidence, doing it in the more rigorous way possible in order to have a very solid and reliable explanation of that. And again, these are just a few words. Each one of them, of course, is a whole theory behind it, but this is just a quick perspective on things. Is engineering, the act of making things happen, have to be systematic, have to look into feasibility, make things doable and practical, and eventually safe. And landscape architecture, kind of depending on the project, move through all of these things, and these are not exclusive of the disciplines above this list, but they're also adding that we're dealing with living systems, and there is a great deal of responsibility in nurture space in more than one way possible. So, because I never do presentations without throwing a little diagram in it. Here it goes. Our development process invokes or calls for three elements. Something needs to happen in a place, and those activities that will happen here respond to the preferences, the needs, the wants, the characteristics of the people that are going to inhabit, occupy, use that space. And in order for that to happen, you need to have the capacity of doing that. So these three things together then become our capacity, our ability to do things the right way. So if we do things correctly, we may create a healthy environment for place and people. If if we match what we need, the way we treat the place, with our ability to transform that place, we can do things efficiently and pollute less, or have a very wise use of resources. And if we do things, our ability to create and do things matches with what people need, and it's a fair distribution. I think we can create a fair space, fair distribution of those benefits and good. And this is good development. What our disciplines do is enhance this. If we do it in a better way, we can enhance this and create not only healthy and safe places to do, but create really powerful experiences. And efficient is not enough. We need to make meaningful spaces. And we can also transform what is fair is to what is shared. Make sure that everybody gets what they should get. Not only because we're enforcing the fairness of things, but because everybody has the opportunity to enjoy what happens. So to me, that is our aspirational boundary. See, we can make, through acts of design and acts of planning, through architectural projects that address these things, I think we're doing together something relevant and important. Another aspects that also are part of our unique approach, I'm now talking about landscape architecture. Our unique approach as landscape architect is our ability to deal with multiple scales. You are being trained to understand that things happen at different scales. And there are big patterns, there are small patterns, there are multiple type of elements that have form, that interact with each other, that change, that expand. So all of these things occur at different sizes, at different scales. So sometimes you're in charge of making decisions about this little park that nobody knows where it is, right? And sometimes it's an intervention that is in a very small scale, but it still has to be meaningful. It has to capture an experience at the same time. And it has to be somehow shared by others, or have the ability of be understood and shared by others. So our major understanding of this, of what we do here in landscape architecture, is that we're dealing with something that is alive, that is gonna get old, that is gonna change, that is going to sometimes die, that we need to understand that it's never gonna be the same. Another aspect of what we do is that what we do here is we create spaces that are not unique for particularly the designer. Architects understand this also, but because landscape architects work more with public space, this is perhaps a little bit more evident. And this shared space means that this guy is going to appropriate the space by sitting in this place, and still others can do things. And this woman over here, leaning over here, controlling the view from that spot. So all of these things are part of what is part of what we do. We create all these opportunities for things to happen this way. Obviously, this space is going to go through a process of interpretation by whoever uses that place. And therefore, everybody's going to have a very different version of those places. And we have to release those designs to that public sharing and expect that not everybody's going to see it the same way. I want to show, this is going to be a quick class in history of landscape architecture. So those who are already taken that, apologies, and so repeat. But now I want to share a few examples of places that I think capture well this confluence of architecture, with landscape architecture, perhaps some of planning and some solid things. And some of these are, I'm sure, are going to be very familiar. You know who this place is. You know, this is Sea Ranch, designed in a collaboration between landscape architects and architects. Fairly recent, 1970 something, right? And this is the development, and there are some other. This is not. I think this one still is part of that. But this is a complex created in Northern California, where the landscape architect had to, not had to, but decided to spend days camping in there, taking sketches, looking and understanding the place, and eventually, together with the architect, building creating something that blends in with the landscape, uses natural materials, responds to climate conditions, and establishes an harmonious relationship with the surrounding landscape. I hope you agree with me. Oh, that's really pixelated. One of the interesting things about this is as simple as one of the major observations by Larry Halprin is that the bend of the trees, which is similar to what we have here at the mouth of the canyon, right? Where the wind moves things in such a way that the trees grow in an angle, and that angle became the guiding principle to establish the shape of the buildings in that. And that creates a very convenient way to deal with wind from the sea and create comfortable courtyards and outdoor spaces that could be dealt with. Another person that I think combines from architecture this sensitivity and ability to understand the outdoor space and the meaningful spaces is Luis Barragan, a Mexican architect that actually studied civil engineer, but he practices as landscape architect, as an architect with a great sensitivity of landscape architecture, created incredibly meaningful spaces where the indoor and outdoor have a very special interaction through color and through very simplistic shapes. This is Casa Giraldi. This is a small house in a neighborhood in Mexico City that is really a very small house, attached homes to both sides. It was owned by a person who lived in a wheelchair and needed water therapy, and so he needed a swimming pool, an indoor swimming pool. And this is the entrance to the house. You walk through this yellow, really yellow hallway into the swimming pool. You can see it over here, and it comes through this with special, really powerful effects of light in here, in a complete different environment. And you turn around and you come to the other end, which is the patio that goes to that swimming pool. And you can see the yellow windows that you see over here. You can see the transformation from, you were talking about what, probably 70 by 70 foot area of the footprint of this area. So you can see the real strong transformation, not shy about color. The understanding of also of this place, this is another chapel designed by Luis Barragan that creates this poetic approach to things that we see often in landscape architecture. This is more an architecture type of things, but this gives us an idea of how we can actually create by simple gestures really powerful statements. The chapel, the people that the nuns, capuchinas that live in this convent, this is the area where the seating area behind the chapel, where the altar is in front on this side, and this cross is not visible from the chapel seating space. So if you're a bunch of nuns here, the cross will be over here on this side, but what they see is the shadow that is projected on the wall behind it through this small glass opening, this window opening that creates that shadow. This is the courtyard that leads to that chapel. It's incredibly simple, but that simplicity and that elegance makes it really, really spiritual in many ways. And these are really small spaces. But he also did this very big, large, horizontal spread. This is the horse stalls in San Cristobal, where he had, these are horse baths, and you can see how you can really move into this place that really connects, makes the interior and the exterior. This probably, hopefully, this explains a little better what I think this architect makes a good blend of landscape architecture and architecture, because the same approach that you see here is what you see inside. And when you see inside, you never leave outside. And when you're outside, you're always connected to inside. And that's really powerful, I think. Another one that is an architect, but this is a landscape architecture project that you all know about, has a lot of power, a lot of meaning. It has incredibly powerful statement over here by a simple gesture of a wall with the Vietnam Memorial, with all the people who died during the wall engraved in this wall that is becomes quite a place to be. The gesture is incredibly subtle, elegant, and it's powerful. But it's built. It's very evident that it's built. It's not a natural form that exists there. It was a gesture on the land, but it is done with a great understanding of how you create the sense of enclosure and at the same time the connection to the landscape and connected to views, axes, etc. So you have studied this one a lot, so I just want to bring it back to your attention, but certainly know more about it. Another place that, in a very different context, is this Sanctuary of Guadalupe in Mexico City. This is a place, this is a 10,000 seat church that in a, but this is, and this is only one part of it. This plaza is part of this very big complex. You're talking about 10 million people that during the month of December make a pilgrimage to this place. So you have to create a place that is capable of handling all of that, and at the same time create sense of safety, order, and provide people with the ability to enter the basilica. And the basilica seems to have doors, but the reality is that it's almost open. The idea of the architecture design here is to make a big tent, look like a big tent that is in there, and it's to allow all these people to come. So a lot of people actually sleep here because they come for after a long pilgrimage, and they rest and sleep for a day or two, and then they pray, and then they go back home to give room to the others. So 10,000 people can fit in here. This was the old basilica. This was the original shrine up here. You can see how it has grown. This one is no longer. They had to build this one because if you can see that it's a little crooked, it was sinking. It's still sinking. So it's not safe to go inside. So it's closed. Nobody can enter that place. But this plaza, and from here you still, and this photo is about half the size of what this plaza is. It doubles in the other direction. You can see Mexico City from above. It's really nice. Another one that you know very well about how well this connection and this inspiration of the landscape creates a place that mimics the landscape and turns it into now these human-made boulders that don't carry water but allow you to stay on top of it. The story is that when Frank Lloyd Wright was taken here to this place, they wanted, the owner wanted to build this house where this photo was taken, because they wanted to have this view of the falls. But Frank Lloyd Wright decided that no, they were going to put it on top of the waterfall, and it's a wonderful place, I think. Same architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, has an incredible sense of sight, and a great sense of sensitivity. Created, this is their Taliesin West is his design studio. He had a studio in Wisconsin, Taliesin. He would close it for winter, for obvious reasons, and then come to Arizona to spend winter in Arizona in this studio. And this studio was built with only 3 materials: stone, wood, and canvas. There was no glass, very little metal, and done very cheaply. And it was these roofs that you see over here that are now panels of insulated panels and everything. It used to be just canvas. So think of this as a place for winter only. And there are all kinds of stories. Look at these boulders that they were rolled from the hill, put in place, put some forms, put a little bit of concrete just to keep them on site, and there you go. You have your place, and it looks the same way inside. Some stories about this place is that Frank Lloyd Wright didn't like the boulders of the hill where he was building this thing, so he made, because he had a lot of students, strong, healthy, young students like here, made students roll these boulders from the next hill into his site, because they were prettier on the other side, like the grass is greener on the other side, right? These elements, water that in a desert environment cools down the place, and the breezes move through. You can see the interior of the studio. This is more current practice. This is no longer canvas, but there was no windows. The wind would blow in there, dust and creatures and all kinds of things. Here's the studio. Here's the pool. Then the entrance that we were looking at had all kinds of an auditorium with, for some reason, crooked benches. It would be interesting to know why. But this was a winter setting. Again, the understanding of the site, the sensitivity of what to do with the site is very, very important, and is very well expressed here. This is not the act of a landscape architect or an architect. These are more an imposition of power and very strong religious beliefs. But this is Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan is in the north of Mexico City, is a complex of pyramids and other temples, like here Quetzalcoatl, or here the Butterfly Palace right here. This complex was built around the year 900, and by the time when the Spaniards came to Mexico, the Aztecs were in control. When the Aztecs came to Mexico around 1300, this place was in ruins already. The people who inhabited and created this place, they were gone. All this was already in ruins. And so there's a whole bunch of mystery about how this place, the reasons and how this place was created. But it has a lot of interesting features that I think help us connect or take this understanding of landscape and understanding of buildings to a whole new level. And that's why I brought it today. This is a very big complex. This is one of the biggest pyramids in Latin America. This is the Pyramid of the Sun. Here's the Pyramid of the Moon. This is the Calzada de los Muertos, the death path. This is facing north. This is from south to north. So you have the largest pyramid to the side, obviously to the east, sunrise on the east side. So that's where the pyramid is. And at the bottom here is this kind of like, it's all kind of interpretations, but one of them calls about some military school, is a shrine, is a kind of a priests and other scholars working here. One thing that is interesting feature here is this is the river, Rio San Juan, and it used to move through here and then up here. Well, these guys decided that no, it needed to be turned and then go around this temple. For some reason, they wanted to have this here and then it's move over there. Pyramids in Latin America are not hollow; they're solid. They grow by aggregation, like an onion. So there's nothing inside pyramids other than a bunch of dirt and rocks. This one has caves under, and there's actually a stream and a cave that goes all the way to the center of it. So the presence of the river somehow is there underground. So that adds more mystery to these things. But a couple of things about sighting and stuff. This is the Pyramid of the Sun. You can see the scale. Notice the scene from the Pyramid of the Moon, and notice how it mimics the mountain that is in the backdrop. So that's not by accident, because if you go to the other, this is the Pyramid of the Moon. There is, if you're walking over here, you see this one matching with this one over here. And it's obviously not a perfect match, but there is a great sense of understanding of the place and the sighting. Not everything is wonderful around here. These pyramids were covered in mortar, and somebody did the calculations at the National University about the amount of wood you needed to burn the lime in order to produce the mortar here, and pretty much explains the lack of trees around this, or how this place has taken so long to recover from this place. They actually deforested all this area over here in order to produce mortar. So I think I enter into landscape architecture from the back door. And my journey into getting into this place is I did my share of some architecture project. This is just one little one. I enter into studies of solar angles and that. I didn't have SketchUp or the wonderful tools that you guys have right now, so I need helpers. During my study, I was able to apply those ideas of environmental design, solar angles, solar architecture to, together with colleagues, friends from Arizona State, be able to develop and produce proposals for housing and this is for Northern Arizona, for the Hopis, and creating houses that could split from 1 to 2 homes, capturing courtyards, understanding typologies and all that stuff. I was able during my time in Toluca to turn a complex, chaotic city like Toluca in trying to understand it through a diagram and trying to explain authorities and planners of the city how this place could be understood in a more abstract way. When I came here to Utah, this is a study we did with Ben was involved in this study on understanding the corridor between Laverkin to Zion. This is the 20-mile entrance to Zion, trying to represent the experience of the place. Then I got into a lot of indicators. I started by doing this, trying to explain. I noticed that between 1960 and the year 2000, the population of the world doubled. So I started saying, okay, what has happened with the world? If the population doubled, everything should double at least, or it should double. If we haven't changed our lifestyle, everything would double. So I put in those 1960 to year 2000, those 40 years, started plotting all kinds of different indicators, and turned out, to not make this story too long, that we double in population, triple in energy consumption, and quadruple in world production. So we have become a much more aggressive species. And that led to several studies on sustainability that I'm still working on. And together with Oli, we did a little bit of assessment of sustainability through indicators and participation of planners. And then here at Utah State, I found a whole bunch of colleagues, and I hope that all of you also find that you are in great hands to enhance your learning and to help you discover what it is. So you're going to find a lot of very inquisitive people here. They're very curious about the world, where everybody has something to bring to the table. So learn to appreciate what everybody brings to the table. The faculty is very not shy about sharing their thoughts about your work. They're quick to give you a review. They can solve any problem. They're strong. They're very skilled in multiple ways. But more than anything, very devoted to the discipline. So I have great respect for all my colleagues. They have been my mentors. They have taught me a lot of things. And they're my friends, and I really appreciate that. That's why I took a liberty of poking a little bit of joke. But we also have students. And all kinds of students. These are the ones in the circles are the ones got an A in my class. But together with students, I have been able to do projects through housing for Central Logan. We did, together with Todd and other colleagues, a project on a monastery here in Huntsville, with a student trying to understand the more abstract issues like this graph over here is a graphic representation of, we collected all the studios of the different programs of the country. We collected all the studios, course descriptions of the 40-something programs in the country, and then we created this, which we call the collective definition of what design is for landscape architecture as a discipline, how we teach from design, understanding through these analyses the most important features, the complementary issues, the different aspects defined by color, etc. So turning knowledge that is dispersed, or not knowledge, but data that is dispersed into information that we can represent in a way that we collectively learn something from it. This is something that I like to do a lot. This is about programs, profiles as well. We've done trying to understand, again, a bunch of data into something that has more visual power, or at least describe in a more clear way what we're doing. This is a study we did with students on the Great Salt Lake watershed. We've done a few models, and some of you hate me for this, but that's okay. So in summary, our job here in this program is building bridges, become conveners, establish connections, find ways of sharing what we do, but in a way that we connect and collect other people's knowledge and other people's disciplines, perspectives, so we can together produce those things that I was calling meaningful and shared. So I think, and this is a bit of a proposition, I like to see that if our lives are a sequence, if you follow this idea for a second, that our lives are a sequence of rituals. Some of them very important: marriage, death, graduation, which is probably your priority right now. And others are still rituals, but they're more ordinary: driving, brushing your teeth, entering your house, saying hi to somebody. If we follow this idea and we start thinking about it and start imagining how this collection of rituals describe our culture, who we are and what we do, and how we are different from others, then our job as designers and perhaps as planners is very simple. All we need to do is provide the right setting for those rituals. And those rituals that can happen every day, or they can happen once in your lifetime, or it can happen once a month, or every Thanksgiving. So we can, our responsibility is doing that, and doing that in the same terms, meaningful and valuable. So I guess I still feel lost, but I want to carry you with me, and in a way that get lost in the discipline get lost in continued learning. And I think you will find a lot of things that connects us with many other disciplines. There's a Mexican poet that I like, and the ending of one of his poems, I think, is a good ending for this talk as well. And this is how Jaime Sabines ends this thing. So it captures what we did. So thank you very much. Jaime? Very good. Thank you.
Hey, does anyone have any questions for Carlos?
Everything was clear as mud.
Nothing. Not even you, Todd.
So thank you for such a thoughtful talk and so open-ended. I think people are still thinking about what you said because it opens up questions, shows beautiful work, pays homage to your colleagues. Really lovely effort. Valuable to all of us. We are in a time where maybe rituals are changing. Not asking you to commit to a political position at all, but what can we do in the future to establish a nicer time using rituals and like what's your forecast? Will we return to nice rituals or not?
You need that?
That's good for you.
I turn it off, but it's back on. I don't have an answer, I guess. But when people make models, they say that the worst thing that they can do is believe their model. So I think a great sense of humility will help us understand these things a little better and connect them with other voices that may have something else to add. And I think that dialogue is perhaps some of what we're losing. Short answer. No answer. Okay. Thanks for your time then.